So this begins our discussion starters that go with the series that Steve started yesterday at Lower Deer Creek Mennonite Church in 1 Corinthians. And it talks about wisdom. So I'd like for you to think about, what does it take to convince you? What does it take to convince you? Now, we're in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. And as you see, I'm not in my normal places. I'm actually in the camper because there was a positive test in our family and I was exposed. Charlene was not. And so to protect her, we're separating living spaces for a while. And that probably has you thinking of a whole lot of different things that are current in our society and current streams of thinking. I would like for you to think in this discussion starter, what convinced you that Jesus Christ is Lord? And if you're not a Christian, what would it take to convince you that Jesus Christ is Lord? And as we turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 31, we look at this passage, and it starts out, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved," continuing tense of the verb, "it is the power of God." And it is. It keeps us going. So down in verse 22, the Jews demand signs, miraculous signs, and we saw that when we looked at John chapter 6. And the Greeks look for wisdom, and they were big into thinking and wisdom and the thinking in their times. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews. Why? Because a king crucified? That can't be. And foolishness to the Greeks. It makes no sense that this crucified person is a savior. "For the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength." And that's an interesting concept, because in verse 27 then it says, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." Most of us who are Christians, when we share our testimony with someone, they think, "Well, that makes no sense at all." And when I share about how in the Christmas Eve service at Grace Hill Mennonite Church in 1977, I heard God through E.J. Miller say, "I want you to serve God." It's foolishness to anybody else, and when you go back and listen to the tape, it's not there, but it's still what I heard. It's still what brought me to ministry. It's still part of my story as I declare Jesus Christ as Lord. So in this discussion starter, and as you're in your group, share those things that convinced you beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus is Lord. And then if you have someone among you who's just discovering what it is like to follow Jesus, ask them what it would take to convince them, because it really is something worth thinking about.